You've looked at Obsidian, you've installed it maybe, and tried to create some new notes, and now the actual question comes of, so what? Why are so many people happy with this tool? Why do they choose it as their favorite note-taking tool? How can I use it to really transform the way I work and learn? Well, you've already realized the most important point here. It's not about the tool, it's about the way you use it. The good news is that Obsidian is pretty good at a few specific things that help you work in a different way. So in this video, I'll go over exactly that. I'll teach you the basics you need to know and the way you need to think to really use Obsidian to its full potential. We'll dive into it pretty quickly. We'll get you slightly uncomfortable, but in that way, you really can start using it quickly. You don't need to know everything about it, but you'll get a lot of value out of it. So that in a few months, maybe you'll realize that, whoa, I've really changed the way I think, thanks to Obsidian and thanks to this new way of working. So let's dive into it. I want to start off with one of my great insights about learning. It'll help you understand Obsidian, it'll make you learn better and actually feel better in the process. You see, it's easy for us to get stuck in this infinite loop of learning and consumption. For example, when I wanted to become attractive to girls, I was 13 and I just started devouring all the information I could find. Everything about psychology and pickup and red pill, everything you can imagine. But I didn't take any action. I didn't get the actual experience. So my first kiss was only when I was 21, right? When I'm building websites, I learned that from a very young age. I took a complete opposite approach, and you can clearly see because I'm very good at it at this point in time. The way I did that was I figured out projects. What can I do? For example, learning French was very difficult, so I built a little application to help me learn my French verbs. And of course, half of the time I didn't know what I was doing, so I needed to research it and then do it. But I think this is the fastest way of learning and the best way to not get stuck in this infinite, like becoming an expert at something before you actually use it. Right? So Dan Coe said this very well. He said, if you are lost, the answer is education. If you're educated, the answer is action. And if you're taking action, the answer is consistency. So what I want to do here is make you just minimally viably competent. Just be good enough to have a lot of value from using Obsidian, right? Especially with social media, we tend to just get stuck in consuming more and more. And if you're like me, you watch YouTube videos and it's actually interesting. You learn something from it and you try to convince yourself like, no, it's very good. I'm becoming smarter now. But then is it really useful if you're not using it? Right? It's in a word, right? Useful. So I want to flip this around. Consume so that you can produce. Start with the end in mind. Why do I want to learn something? And then only go out and learning it, right? So this is exactly what I was talking about in my other video on how to become an all-rounder, how to become this universal man, right? If you want to become good at everything in life, you really need to learn the minimum amount of possible because there's just so much things to learn. And so, anyways, after this video, you will know enough to use Obsidian for half a year or a year at least. So you'll be good. And if you want to get deeper, if you're really interested in the topic, you can go watch more of my videos, right? But you will already have a lot of value from it. You start by brushing one tooth. And only when you have this habit down of the one tooth, go to the other teeth. Start with a habit and only then go to the expertise. It doesn't make sense to do it the other way around. Philosophically, the most important difference between Obsidian and another tool like Notion, for example, is when you start organizing. You see, in Notion, when you want to create a new note, you first have to know where you will put it. So you need to organize before you actually start writing. And this is like this big point of friction for a lot of people, especially for me. I only want to organize when I need to organize, right? I don't want to get this roadblock when I have creative output to create, when I'm inspired, right? And with Obsidian, it's the other way around. You first create something, and then after that, you add the structure, you add the organization, just as much as you need, exactly when you need it. So I suggest we do this and we take the just-in-time approach. You know, most people over-organize actually. When if you're a person who likes organizing. You might have this thing where on your computer you have a list of different folders about all kinds of categories, and in each folder there's just one file. So the question is then, why would you make all those folders? It just makes it more difficult to get to your actual end goal, that is finding your files. Now you need to click through each different folder to know which file is in there. Right? So just take the other approach. Do it just in time. Have one folder where you throw everything in, and then at some point it'll feel like, oh, this is really getting annoying. This is really getting on my nerves. It's difficult to find everything. That is what we call a mental squeeze point. It's a concept I got from Nick Milo from Linking Your Thinking. He has great videos on Obsidian. So at the mental squeeze point, that is when you start organizing. Do it just in time, just as you need it, so that way you can just get the most productive, get the most done as soon as possible. To be honest with you, this has some drawbacks too. It's very easy to only write and add stuff to your notes without any purpose. So why would you keep doing it, right? If you're just writing or copy pasting or importing things into the void and you never use it, then what's the whole purpose of all of it? If it's just going to get lost in the nothingness of this void, why would I make the notes? It's something I struggle with from time to time, but the best way I found of dealing with it is gardening. So think of your notes as being a garden. So what do you do when you have a garden? Well, once in a while you go into your garden and you take a little stroll. Every time you might have a different route. You see different plants, you see different flowers. You look at them, you appreciate how beautiful they are. You have some gardening tools with you, so maybe you prune some old leaves, you plant a new plant, you move one plant to another place. So just every time you see you take a different route. Every time you see different things, and every time you work a little bit here and there. So I would say you take the same approach with your notes. Go through your notes, take a walk, have a look at all those different notes, and then you can add some organization, summarize a bit, clean up a bit, maybe delete one note, or maybe add something new. And Obsidian works really well with this approach of looking through your notes. Because we link notes. We don't put them in folders. We make links between notes. So it's just like in Wikipedia. You have all the blue links everywhere. All the rabbit holes you can dive into. Well, here the rabbit holes are things that you created yourself. So it's actually 10 times more interesting, right? So make it a habit to once in a while go through it and go through digitally gardening. It's honestly one of my favorite activities to do in my notes. And you can do it at any point in time. When you're a bit bored and you're just waiting in line, open your notes on your phone and start scrolling through it, looking what's there, organizing a bit, like, oh yeah, oh my god, this was super smart. That idea, that is amazing. So not just throw things in there, but actually garden. Okay, if you're still here, that means that these ideas speak to you, and that probably means that Obsidian is a good tool for you. That is what I wanted to do with this first part, explain you the philosophy of the tool so that you know, is this a good fit for me? Because for some people, it's just, they really like organizing and Notion is much better for them. Right? But if you're still here, that means Obsidian is good. So let's ask one important question before we start creating our first note. That is, why are you taking notes? You see, most people, when they want to put a note and organize it, they organize it by category. This is something about psychology. But actually, that makes it kind of hard. That makes it so easy to have these 20 folders with just one file in them. But when you think about that, that is the what of a note. It's not the why of a note. And the why of the note might be, I want to become more attractive. Or the why of your note might be, I want to learn JavaScript. So my suggestion to you would be, because the goal is to find your notes again. The goal is to use your notes. Organize them in your projects instead of in categories. Organize them where you will actually need them the next time. And it might feel like it's a mess at the start, but you can always move them later. And actually, if you're using Obsidian, you can put them in multiple places at the same time because you're linking. You're not putting the files in a specific folder actually. So let's go now through 4 different levels of using Obsidian. You can stop at any time. At any level, you can choose which level you want to be, but I suggest you start with level 1 and just slowly go to the different levels as far as you are comfortable, as far as you like. After level 4, you will get to a point where it's most of my system. So you'll be able to use it for half a year or a year at least before you really want something else. Except of course, if you're interested in the tool, you really want to dive deep and figure out what all the nitty-gritty features are, which is me. So then you can look at all the other videos and dive deeper into it. So let's go to level 1. Level 1 is creating notes. Okay, let's take an example. I've created a new Obsidian vault. It's completely empty. There's nothing in there. And so imagine we're reading an article and we want to write some notes about it. I'll change this to light mode. If you press Control or Command P, you will open up the command palette, which lets you type in whatever you want to do and it'll do it. So it's one of your most used keyboard shortcuts probably. So I'll type in light to change it to light modes. That's probably a bit easier for you to read. So I have this article here. I built an AI chatbot based on my favorite podcast. So let's make a note. I will use the other most used shortcut, Control O or Command O. That is to find or create a note. So I want to create a note now. I will paste in the title here. And then I press enter and it creates the new note. So you see here in the sidebar, it's created this new note. I have it over here. So yeah, let's imagine we're reading this and we think there's some very interesting notes in there. We kind of paste stuff in there. Oh, this is nice. I didn't actually read the article yet, but I want to read it. So I I don't know what actually is interesting. So, well, anyways, just have some text in there. Right. Okay, there we go. Personally, I like adding a little bit of organization right at the start when I do it, because it's always the same. So at the start of the file, I would often have like a tags. I do double call. I know. I think it's pretty. It's not necessary at all. I have a tags for articles. I usually do hashtag source/article, right? And then I might add some topic. So this is about AI. In this case, I want to link it to another page. So I'll type in my double square brackets, and this lets me link to pages. You see that the current page is in there, so I can link to it already. I'll type in AI. All right, this is one. And maybe another thing, well, it's about podcasts, so let's call it podcasting. And maybe I'm reading this as part of a project, and it's about, let's call it, well, actually, maybe I am building an AI chatbot, so call it based on like Joe Rogan AI chatbot. This would be one of my personal projects. And you see here, and I'm adding all this stuff, but these pages, they don't exist. It's just like in Wikipedia, you can link to things that don't exist yet. And that is one of this, like, you might think it's a small feature, but it's a huge feature of Obsidian. Because it lets you organize before you actually organize. All these things, they don't exist, but I'm adding layers of organization as fast as I can. This is the fastest way of doing it. So this is, I'll also add an author. I don't know what the author of this article is. Dan Shipper. Right, and I'll probably want to add the source too, so I'll link to this. Voila, there we go. So that way I can find it back later, what it's about. So this is the most basic thing. You create notes and add links, and as we will see later, the organization starts to emerge from this type of creating notes. Now, level 2. It will very quickly become a mess like this if you have tens of notes over here. So we can actually spend some time to set up a minimal folder structure so you can start to get going. I like using what's called PARA, Project Areas Resources Archive. It's a system invented by Tiago Forte from Building a Second Brain. If you don't know Building a Second Brain yet, I suggest that this becomes your next rabbit hole to dive deep into, because it will change your life on note-taking. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. So we'll create these 4 folders. We have a new folder button. Actually, I'll add numbers in front because I want them to be in this order. Projects to resources. Actually, no. It's to archive. No, areas. God damn it. Focus. 3 resources. And 4 archive. So let's go over them. Actually, what you want to do is you prefer to add your notes. You prefer the topmost folder. So this is why I add the numbers so that they're alphabetically, if they're sorted, they show up this way. Projects are things that are time bound. that have a specific start date and an end date that stop at some point. So those are actually the notes you'll probably look at the most of your time, because most of the time you're doing something in the context of a bigger project or goal. Then we have the areas which don't have a specific end date, but they're more like they're standards to uphold. This might be your health or your relationships or your finances, right? That doesn't end at any point in time, but they do all needs regular attention. Then you have resources, which can be general topics of interest like podcasting, like AI, like psychology. And then we have archive, which is just all the rest that doesn't really have a place. Actually, the interesting thing here about archive is you can move things in and out of the archive. If you're not interested in a topic anymore, just move it from your resources to the archive, and then later you can move it back. If a project is finished, move it from the projects to the archive. Actually, for me, basically all of my notes are in the archive. Because with Obsidian, you don't have to have a specific location. You just throw them all in the same folder. But I do still like having the project areas and resources as kind of starting points for where do I start looking at my notes. So these are my entry points for new things for when I start gardening, basically, when I'm walking through this garden. Cool. Actually, there's a fifth folder, the inbox, not zero box. And this is what I set up to be the place where all my new notes end up. You might think maybe I'll throw them straight into the archive, but personally I like having a list of notes that I might want to go through and organize just a little bit. Like I will add notes on an article without this front part, and so it's not organized at all. And if I just throw it straight into the archive, I will just lose it. So I want my new notes to actually always end up in the inbox. And we can change the setting. If we go to the settings here, then let's go to files, default location for new notes, and we have a specific folder. We'll choose inbox. There we go. So if we create this is a note on another article, I created. Whoa. And now if you look here, it's actually in the inbox. So that way it doesn't end up cluttering this sidebar, which are just our 4 main areas. So now we have a very simple folder structure, and we will move our article to the archive. Let's imagine we have another article that we're reading. We'll tag it source article. We'll also link it to, let's say we'll link it to AI, and maybe we're reading about engineering. Specifically, it's about cars. There we go. Cool. So we've processed this article and we'll move it to the archive as well. Nice. So these other pages that don't exist yet, let's actually go and create them so that we have something in this sidebar. So I'll go to this AI chatbot. If I click on AI, then you see it creates the notes. It's empty now. So AI is actually, it's an area of interest. So I'll move it to resources. I have this one podcasting. That's also a resource. I have Joe Rogan AI chatbot. That's my personal project that I'm working on because I want to turn Joe Rogan into an AI chatbot. And then shipper, it's a person that doesn't fit into any of those. So I'll just move it to the archive, and maybe I'll tag him with a person. There we go. Cool. Our other article has some more resources, engineering, choop, and cars. Choop. Let's make an area for relationships. Just so we have something in here. Finances. There we go. We'll close these tabs here. Perfect. So we have some basic notes in our folder structure. So now level 3, we've talked about gardening, and maybe you're asking yourself, like, what's the goal of gardening? What do I do? What do you mean with going through and pruning the leaves? Like, I can't prune the leaves of notes, right? For me, this is about learning and about consolidating information. So I don't just want to read stuff. I want to think about it. I want to have conclusions, and I want to remember the key points. So my main focus in this gardening is that I try to create what I call evergreen notes. So these are notes not for a project. They're not notes for a topic. They're not about an area. They're not about a piece of content. In fact, they're notes about a concept or a statement, right? They're timeless, and they are alone. And it's usually a conclusion or an idea that I got from an article or from a video or from my own thinking, something that I might invent. So concepts are things that have a name. For example, we have para. Oh, no, I don't want to create a folder. Delete this. Yes. So a concept is something like para. So it's a, what is para is a way of organizing your files. You have 4 folders: projects, areas, resources, archive, right? And then I will tag this a concept, right? So as I'm going through this, and I'm gardening, so I might be reading this AI chatbot. So for example, one of his suggestions is to do task bracketing to help create habits. So task bracketing, that is a concept, right? So I'll select it and press the square bracket open, and that way it immediately links to it. I can't remember exactly what it means. Okay, so I'll click this, I'll create it. Let's imagine what it might be. We'll tag it with a concept, and it's of course linked to AI. It's putting tasks between brackets. I have no clue because I didn't read the article. So this is a concept, right? And so as you go through your notes, this is my goal. I want to figure out what the concepts are, because that way, when I look at the titles of my notes, it's this condensed information. It's really the key points of it. So we have concepts. We also have statements. For example, with Evergreen notes, your insight accumulates. Right? And this will of course be linked to Evergreen notes, because the Evergreen note is a concept, right? And this is what I call a statement. So I'll tag this a statement, right? A statement is just a short sentence that is like a key point of insight. It's very few words, but a very nice summary. And so once you start creating these kinds of notes, you'll start noticing that they return in multiple sources. It's one of the best feelings ever, where you're reading an article and it's like, oh my god, it's just like this other point I realized, right? And this also helps you create new content. I use this for my videos. When I want to create a new video, for the most part, it's a collection of these statements of concepts. I just list down a bunch of them, and that's kind of the outline of my video. There's a couple of things I want to talk about, and I think of a story to surround it and to explain it, but that's mostly it, right? So these 3 things, I will all put them in my archive, because they're not a project, they're not an area, they're not a resource. And so now you might be thinking, hold on, this archive is getting huge. So let's go to level 4, not losing notes, with backlinks and MOCs. So we're at a point where we're kind of like, shit, this is gonna start disappearing into the void. I'm gonna lose this forever. So how do I make sure I find the right notes at the right time? Well, this is where one of the most powerful features of Obsidian comes in. That's called backlinks. Remember how we tagged this article with these, these tags, and we've created those pages? Well, let's say, so we linked it with AI. Let's go to the AI page, and if I open the sidebar on the right here, see that this one has backlinks for AI. It's a bit expanded. I want to collapse this actually. You see that it's linked 3 times. So because in the notes about this article, we linked to AI, when we go to AI in the backlinks pane, this one shows up. So this is one of this core features in Obsidian that will give you this path through the garden. It automatically creates this 2-directional links, because you link it in one way and it creates the link in the other way. So this is one of the main ways that creates your path through the garden, right? So this is nice, but with a lot of backlinks, it can kind of become disorderly, right? It just sorts it alphabetically or by date, or I mean, you can choose, but when you have tens or thousands of them, this is annoying and it's hard to get through it. So the next level here is we will create what we call a map of content. It's also an idea I got from Nick Milo from Linking Your Thinking. So a map of content is not this disorganized list, but an organized list. So let's say let's create a heading. So you create a heading with a little hash symbol. Second heading, concepts, and then we just create a list of link. So this is task bracketing. This is one of the concepts, right? And let's make one articles. I built a chatbot and a new one. This is, oh, this, whoa, is a note on another article. So this way it becomes organized. We create a little kind of structure, just enough structure so that we can find our way through. So if we're looking here, let's go to resources. Oh yeah, concepts, task bracketing. And then, you know, you start walking through the garden. So we just list out a few things. We don't have to list out everything. We might just list out our favorites, or we might just list out nothing, or we just kind of add things as we go or not. And the great thing about this is that this is links. All of them there in archive. So maybe I want this task bracketing, I can actually apply it to engineering as well. So I will go to engineering and I'll do concepts. And I'll add task bracketing, right? So you see that now it feels like it's in two different folders. And this works only in Obsidian or similar tools like Obsidian, because it's links that are primary. It's not the place or the location of your files. Okay, at this point, you know enough about Obsidian to start using it for like at least half a year or a year of note taking. This is all the structure you need. These are the basics, right? And you can start building your own digital garden. One of the great things I suggest you to do is to look at other people's digital garden. If you're like me, if you're interested in learning a lot about different things, if you want to become a master in all areas of life, become this Renaissance man, this new universal man, be sure to subscribe. And I have my years of condensed knowledge, my own vaults published, so that way you can look into it. And I'll use it to create new content and create concepts for this, create new videos on this channel. If you want to go deeper into Obsidian, let me know in the comments. If there's anything specific that you want to know about, we'll go into it, but I can also just go deeper into more nitty-gritty of what I'm doing. I've made another video about how to make a lifelong learning habit from Obsidian that goes just a little bit deeper into this gardening stuff and explains you a bit more concepts in a bit more time, so that's also interesting for you to watch probably. Anyways, if you're here, that means that hopefully that means that you've had some value from this video, so please give it a thumbs up so that way YouTube knows to show it to more people. And yeah, thank you. I'll see you in the next one. Whoop.